So for this week's project, we're going to be having a look at this 1967 Masterwork stereo system. This is basically an AM/FM tuner and a Girard turntable mounted into a cabinet that kind of has the resemblance of a roll-top desk. This comes with a couple of matching speakers to go with it. And this unit comes from my friend's shop. It was in the box, the original box with the factory packing and the original factory paperwork that came with it. And the story behind this is that many years ago, this was brought in by a customer, and the technician that was looking at this had went ahead and repaired it, gave the guy a quote on it, and he declined the estimate and said he was going to pick it up. So of course that repair had to be undone and the defective part put back in it, and then they boxed it up, and fast forward years later and it never was picked up. So the idea now is to see if we can get this fixed. We're going to put it up for sale and split the money. So I don't know, we'll have to see if we can find out what's wrong with it and maybe what was done to it and redo the repair. Our intro music this week, we are listening to the classic album by the Small Faces entitled There Are But Four Small Faces, and their classic song Tin Soldier. Of course, frontman Steve Marriott would go on to form Humble Pie, and of course Kenny Jones would go on to join The Who. So let's listen to their classic song here before we get started on this stereo.
Smiles melting the snow of your eyes, they're deeper than time, saying love that won't lie without words. So now I'll come my way. I need her to show me things to say. Don't give me your love before my days away. I got to know that I'll be
All right, let's pick back up and we'll have a look at this thing real quick. Our tuner on this side here basically got your balance, volume, treble, bass. All these controls feel nice and tight. Doesn't seem to be any issue. Tuning is moving freely. Power switch, auto off and on. I assume auto off is when it reaches the end of the record, it would shut the radio off if you had it in that mode. And then up here, we have phono, FM, FM stereo, AM, and auxiliary, and it has at the top here a right and left RCA jack for an auxiliary input, so it is possible for patching in a tape deck or something. Got a tuning meter right in the center, and the FM stereo pilot, it seems to be right about mid part of the dial. And then we have this Girard Model 3000 turntable built into this side of it. And as for the cartridge, it's a Pickering V15. Hopefully that shows up. Stylus looks to be intact, but I guess we'll know more once we get it repaired. As for the speakers, these grills are made or nailed, tacked on, I guess you would say, and I did pull the tacks out of one so we can have a look. There's a single 5.5-inch full range speaker in each cabinet, and they are connected by, not surprising, RCA jacks. And I did get some wire. There's the old wire that came with it. Of course, these are in pretty sad shape, but we do have the original ones. Here's the box. It's a model M-4660. And Masterwork, apparently a division or product of Columbia Records back in the day. I don't know if that has anything to do with the Columbia Record and Tape Club. Probably not, but And we got the original envelope that has everything on it to keep your stuff in, owner's manual, and then a list of places you can get it worked on. And then we have the spindle for multi-record play versus the single spindle that's already there. So yeah, I think the first thing is let's see what it'll do or what it won't do. Let's get it hooked up, hook the speakers up to it. We'll start off using the wires that they provided for us and see if those are any good, or at least good enough to do some testing. And let's see if the radio will work at all. It was my understanding that one channel of it had a problem and one channel didn't originally when we started the whole process back in the day. So let's see if that turns out to still be the case. So give me a second for that. We'll get it hooked up and see if it'll work. So I got it hooked up, and one of our factory speaker cables was bad, so I just substituted out one of the bench patch cables. And it will work with the auxiliary coming into it. If I patch a dump out of the bench receiver into this, it will work. But as far as the internal tuner, we got nothing. It is absolutely silent. I mean, I get a little bit of popping and just a little bit of static, but I don't really get anything else. Now, if we go to the phono, and we come over here and brush our needle, we got some activity there, so the phono needle is working, or the cartridge is working, it appears.
Classic rock.
It doesn't seem very loud, though. I don't know if that's just because of the auxiliary feed not being very loud or what, but so I don't know. Obviously there was an issue with the tuner. I'm going to assume that was what the problem was, so I'm going to see what I can do about getting this out of here. I don't know. I assume I'm going to have to go in through the bottom, but if I can get this whole thing out and get it on the bench, we can work on this a lot easier. And then we can kind of get an idea of what they did. Maybe we can see by where his solder marks are or what. And we'll get one fixed for us. All we have to do is just put the right parts in. So let me go ahead and see if I can get this apart, and we'll pick back up and see if we can get the tuner working. No AM, no FM, but phono and auxiliary working. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and pick back up, and what I did was lean it on one end of it, lock the turntable down with the lock screws so I could get to this point, and taking this out is going to be a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. And this is full of old germanium transistors, germanium diodes, and possibly some bad caps. The only thing I see out of place here is right around in this area, and let's see if we can get a fix on that. Is somebody did something right in here. That looks like it may have arced to something, and that is definitely not from 1967. So I don't know if it was bad caps. I did run through some of these, and all these low value caps, which these are weird, like 5 mic. Is that what that is? 5 mic? Yeah, 5 mic. 15 volt caps, these are all bad. So I'm not sure. And up here in the tuning section, you can see this has those old tuning cans in it, IF cans, and every one of those caps is bad. So I don't know if that's why my tuner's not working. I didn't check this one. I found it up under this wire bundle, and that's 100 mic. And so I think what I want to do, I'm going to start checking through some of these and jumper some in. The first thing I'm going to do is, this looks weird and kind of out of place a little bit. But I don't know if that's really the case, or it's just that he arced something when he was making checks. He may have arced his probe to this, or he was trying to do something, I'm not sure. So I'm going to check that, make sure that's okay, 33K, and then maybe a couple of these transistors to see, because this was the area he was in right through here. So we're going to see if there was anything done that, you know, shouldn't have been done. So I don't know. I know that's definitely not supposed to be there. So he was on the track right there somewhere. So let's go ahead and let me see if I can confirm the value of that resistor. I'm going to double check the transistors just in this little circuit right here. And then from that point, I'm going to go ahead and jumper in some caps and see if it changes the tuner in this. So yeah, this is old. There's no question about that. So, you know, and I'm not usually one to whine about having a manual, you know, but in this particular case, it'd be nice to have one. So we're just going to have to kind of see if we can figure it out little by little. Got all four of our original outputs here. Everything looks pretty good, but this is the only thing that looks out of place, and so this looks like the area he was working in. So let me do a little checking through there and see what I can find out, and then we'll pick back up. Okay, so we're going to pick back up, bring you back, and give you kind of an update of progress I've made. I went ahead and got it out of here. That turned out to be a little bit of a pain, but luckily they mounted the transformer down here in the turntable section, but the wiring was long enough to get it out to where I could get it on the bench and kind of go over things. And sure enough, a few more caps have been changed underneath here, and that seems to be the only place right in the little power supply section right there. So for now, we're going to leave those alone. But thinking about this, we got an amplifier that does work, both channels, through the auxiliary input and through the phono cartridge. It seems to give us some noise in both right and left channels when we brush up against the stylus. So obviously our problem was in the IF section. So I got to looking through this, and of course we know that there was some caps that were low in value. So I went ahead and switched those out. These are 100 mic at 12 volt. And so I went ahead and switched those out with the proper ones, the axle lead ones, and I'm going to put some heat shrink tubing on the leads of these and fix these properly. And I did have one 5 mic that I changed, but I didn't have an axle lead for that, so we'll just use a radial lead one. But still didn't work. No improvement whatsoever, actually. I mean, it just basically, you know, still the same thing. So I got to looking through here, and I noticed that on this transistor right here, it looked like there was a spot of solder on it, like somebody tagged it with a soldering iron. And so, working on that theory that the guy was looking for a flaky transistor, which is what I would have done too, I got out my heat gun. Let's fire that up.
From Casey's that lets you turn your purchases into donations to your school. Sign up in the Casey's app and earn points you can turn into school donations. Casey's Cash.
And that will bring it back. All it takes is just a little heat and it'll come back.
Select vitamin. Most others are buy one, get one 50% off in stores.
So he had it nailed. He knew what was going on. And then from that point, he never got around to changing this. So he probably basically started on the same theory that I would have started on. He knows there's some caps that are bad. So you're certainly not going to start chopping out semiconductors when you know you've got bad caps. So you're just going to jumper some in and see where you get. So I got no issues with troubleshooting that was done here at all. I mean, he was on it. He knew what was going on. So I'm going to see what I can do about finding a replacement for this. I probably do have an ECG that will be a good replacement for in here. But if not, I do have some old circuit boards with some germanium transistors that we can probably pull one off of and put in there. But I'm not cutting this out until I find out what it is. This is like my worst nightmare is having a stereo that's this old, where it has all this point-to-point wiring on it, and somebody else worked on it before me, because you always wonder, did they do something they shouldn't have done, or did the guy get pissed after the estimate was refused and decided he'd make the problem worse? I don't think that would be the case. Definitely not for anyone working at my friend's shop, but you just never know, and your mind kind of wonders about those things. So let me go ahead. I'm going to get some heat shrink put on the leads of these and get these put in properly, and let's see what we can locate for this. But we know that this is definitely the issue why the tuning's not working, because as soon as it comes back to life, we got full stereo pilot, the signal meter works, and the tuning is very selective the way it's supposed to be. So let me go ahead and see what I can find for a replacement for that, and we'll pick back up. But definitely making some progress here. Yeah, that's the first time those circuits have heard any shit like that. Well, we got it up and running. I actually did have the transistor in stock that we needed. That's a 2SA132, I believe is what I put in there. What is it? I actually have these. I don't know why I have them, but I do have them. 2SA132. The one that came out of there was a 2N990, I think. 2N990, yeah. Both transistors basically just cross to basically an NT160 germanium PNP transistor, RF, IF amp, FM mixer oscillator, which would totally jive with why it just failed to work altogether. Touched up the capacitors I replaced here, and I still have these. They're going to be changed out to the axle lead ones. And there's a couple more that I'm going to change too. I'm not going to change them all, but I am going to change the ones that are bad. And then from that point, I think we can go ahead and get this back in here. And I'm sure there's a nightmare awaiting with this. I already tried to turn it on, and it does move. It's just real sluggish, so I'm not even going to worry with trying to put a record on it until I get it all tore down and we can see what the inner wheel drive looks like and all of that. But yeah, got it taken care of. Transistor in stock, and we got a working radio.
Like us on Facebook.
I don't know that I'd want to be poked by you.
Is that still a...
All right, I'm going to go ahead and get the power supply tidied up with the correct capacitors, and we'll go ahead and get it put back in the cabinet and get it hooked up and start working on the turntable. But yeah, thanks to him putting that little tag on the case of that transistor, it made it easy for me to locate which one it was, but it would have been easy enough. Let's get your heat gun out and get a little heat going, and usually those germaniums will pop back in and start working. So, all right, give me a few minutes for that, and then we'll pick back up. All right, we're going to pick back up. This is going to be day 2. Went ahead and swapped out all of the radio caps for the correct axle lead ones. Tidied up everything here, and in place of the really small 5 mic at 12 volt caps, I used 10 mic at 25 volt radio caps. We just insulated the leads, and these are pretty small, and so they're not a big eyesore. They're black, so they don't look like these kind of sticking in there. This was the first one we found when I opened this up, was this 220 mic cap that was here. So I went ahead and replaced that with a 330. This is a 330. And everything's sounding pretty good. Both sides, very clean, very nice. So there's definitely times when recapping is necessary. I guess if you wanted to. I didn't change every cap in this. I just changed the ones that I could find that were bad. Yeah, there's times when changing a bulk of capacitors is a good thing. And this is all the ones that I changed. Those are the ones that he had changed. I just took out his radial ones and swapped them out for the axle lead ones. So I guess we're moving on to this. And the first thing, we'll get the platter off and see what the inner wheel drive looks like. But as for the amplifier and the tuner, everything's working good. Got her going. So give me a second for that. We'll pick back up on the turntable. All right, we'll pick back up. Got the platter off of it. And surprisingly enough, still had the factory clip on it, which was good. The wheel is a little stiff, but it might be able to be brought back. Everything here, of course, is nice and froze up. So let's go ahead and start, and we'll take that off real quick. And sometimes this will come right off, and sometimes not. So let's go ahead, we'll heat it up. We can get it off a lot easier if we heat it up versus trying to pry it up with a screwdriver, which is not recommended. We use our little Weller torch here. Let's kind of get it hot. Try not to heat me up at the same time and burn myself. It's getting there. Getting closer. Getting closer. Yeah, I think we got it. Okay. It's a very effective method for getting that off. Beats the hell out of trying to pry up on it with a screwdriver, damaging it, possibly bending the shaft it's sitting on. So, let's see here. I'm going to let it cool down. It's a little warm. Let's go ahead and take this off. Inner wheel drive. We'll use a little rubber revitalizer on that. Let's see if that'll bring things back to life a little bit. Sometimes it does, and sometimes not. But it is still pretty flexible. It just feels kind of rough right there. So let's take a look at the inside of the platter and see what that looks like. Oh, it looks okay. Shouldn't be no problem there. Chances are pretty good once we get all this, get new grease on this and get this all back together. We'll have to go underneath and loosen up a few of the mechanism arms under there. Motor spins over real good. No issue there whatsoever. But we will give it a little bit of lubricant. All right. Let me go ahead and find us a towel so we can start getting this cleaned up, and then we'll pick back up. All right, so we're picking back up. And as I realized after I got this cooled down enough to start to mess with it, that the other piece was hardened in there to the point to where I had to use some heat to get it out too. But I did get it out, and now I'm just working with it to get it nice and fluid moving again. And basically, I cleaned out whatever residue I could out of these holes from the old hardened grease, and then I put a little bit of WD-40 in the hole and got that cleaned out. And now we moved on to the grease, and I want this to move nice and smooth. And I'll take it and put it upside down in the hole, and you know, any way I can, just to make sure that there's no hesitation. All the pieces move very nicely together. And so we're going to take a little more grease. We're going to put a little bit right there. And then we'll do our final little test here. And we'll put on our clip. Not that. Moving together very nicely. And this piece will do the same. Put some new grease on it. And this, you have to hook under there first and then into here. So they kind of move independently of each other a little bit. And then we'll put our clip back on here. There we go. So they move really nicely inside that little mechanism. They move together pretty smoothly. No issue there. Now I had started already putting some grease in here when I realized I didn't have this piece out, so let's pick that back up. I went ahead and took care of this. Over here, you want to make sure that this bushing is actually moving. So many times I've taken these apart and that is frozen, and you'll have to use, you know, heat again to free up this off the shaft that it's locked onto. It's locked onto that. So you want to make sure that's moving. Did a little grease down in here. So pretty much everywhere we could, you know, take care of all the moving pieces. And so we'll just put a new layer here where our cam gear rides, or I guess cam pivot, whatever you want to call it. I guess this is the cam gear, and that's the pivot arm, maybe. I'm sure they got a fancy word for it in the service manual. And just make sure the surface is, you know, completely covered. And then we will slide her back on there. I always try to go for the outermost part, because you know it's going to hit right there. Maybe. And this is another one that you'll have to kind of work. Have to put it up and down a few times to get it where it's moving nice and fluidly. And we can tell we got it in there. Feels pretty good. So now all I got to do is find the clip that I took off when I removed it. So there we go. Snap that in place. And we got that moving really nice. There we go. All right, next we'll move on to this. I'll go ahead and get this cleaned up and we'll get this reinstalled. And then we'll start it up and see if it's moving a little bit better than it was when I first tried it, when I first got it. So give me a minute for that and we'll pick back up. So we'll pick back up. I got this cleaned up, but unfortunately it has petrified itself right on the end here. It's really, just really, really, really hard. It doesn't sound like hitting that. It sounds like hitting plastic. It feels about like this screwdriver does. I thought I'd be able to clean it up and bring it back because of its flexibility here, but you can almost tell where down into that, how far down into that. It's hardened or glazed over. So I don't know. I suppose I could try to spin it and sand it down. That's never worked out for me very well. And I do have a few of these in stock, so let me see what I have. I probably don't have this one. But I think the first thing we'll do is let me see if I can figure out how to get it in my drill, and we'll spin it on a piece of sandpaper and see if we can get this down to some actual gripping properties. And then we'll pick back up. So give me a second for that. All right, so as we pick back up, I went ahead and cleaned it up with the rubber revitalizer, and this is looking pretty good. I mean, it feels like it is complete rubber again. Now, like I said, I've had mixed results doing that in the past. A lot of times I've tried to do it with wheels that have just been way too far gone to try to do that with, but this feels pretty good. And when I put that drill bit, I turned that drill bit into the top, not the bottom part, but the top part, just a turn, just enough to get it to hold on to this wheel so I could spin it over in my drill. There's probably some kind of an attachment I could get that would actually, you know, work, but putting a drill bit, you definitely want to do it through the top, not through the bottom. And I just put it in there just about maybe a turn, if not half a turn. Just enough to grip it to where I could spin it in my drill. And it looks pretty good, so let's go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and get it installed, and we'll see what we got. Don't know. Always a mixed bag. You never know. Maybe it's the ticket, maybe it's not. So let me go ahead and get it put in and we'll find out. All right, so we're going to pick back up. Got the inner wheel drive put back in the unit, got the platter put back on, and surprisingly enough, the torque is pretty good. Don't really have any issue with the torque, and the speed itself looks pretty good. I mean, obviously you're not going to get direct drive quartz accuracy with this, and I'm sure that you can't see the strobe through the phone camera, but it's not doing too bad. This is looking pretty good, actually. But we do have an issue. I'll go ahead and try it for you here. But we got a stylus issue. It's pretty much worn down to the nub from what I can tell. Doesn't sound too good. Of course, using our Thin Lizzy test record there. And our other issue is we're struggling with auto return features. It's almost like the arm is not being elevated correctly. So that could just be another stuck lever underneath the unit. My speed selector, I did have to lubricate that part of it from underneath. It wasn't raising and lowering correctly, so I had to take care of that. But the needle thing is an issue. I'm going to have to see if I have one. I do have a Pickering cartridge in stock, not a new one, but an old one, and it does have a stylus in it. I don't know if it's the same one, but I'm hoping that it will be good enough just to try in this so I can get a better idea as far as the sound quality. But this one is definitely, you can tell it is worn down to the nub once you start looking at it. Obviously, I don't think we'll be able to see it here, but it is in bad shape. And so we're going to definitely have to do something about that. So let me grab this other Pickering cartridge and let's get a different needle in it. Hopefully it will fit just so we can try it, and then we'll get a little bit better idea as far as sound quality. So give me a second for that. All right, as we come back in, I did look through my stash, and as it turns out, I've got two Pickering cartridges with styluses attached to them. And one of them is a V15. Both are V15s, but one is exactly like the one that is in this turntable. This one says a V15 ACE or ACI 3. But when you look at this and you look at the stylus from the one that's in this turntable, they are pretty much dead on. The only difference is I think my version has a little record brush on it, but I don't see how that would make a difference. But yeah, they look very, very close. Of course, the difference is that the tip of the one that I have in my collection here is much better than the one that is here, which is non-existent pretty much. So let's go ahead and we'll put this in and give it a shot and see what happens here. I'm not going to change the whole thing. I'm just going to slide the stylus in and see what we get. Turn our volume up a little bit. Yeah, sounds a little better there. I don't know, it sounds pretty good to me. So we definitely got a winner on that. So it looks like what we need to try to mop up is our automatic function for our arm. I don't know if there's, like I said, something underneath that is creating that issue. Hopefully we don't have any worn down parts, or we're going to have a manually operated turntable in this bad boy. So let me look into that, and then we'll pick back up and see what I found out. So give me a few minutes. All right, we're going to pick back up and did a little housekeeping on some of the wiring here. Kind of bundled those nicely with some wire ties, just to make sure that when our top cover moves into position, it doesn't get caught up in any of the wiring. And as far as the arm elevation issue, when I was working on this mechanism, which basically what this does is it raises and lowers the inner wheel drive, and of course puts it on the correct position on the motor spindle for whatever speed you select. And this was a little dry, and so it was a little bit jerky when it was operating. So I had went ahead and lubricated that and got that working perfectly. But in the process of that, I was looking at all this other mechanism stuff, and it was all moving really freely. There wasn't any kind of hesitation that I seen whatsoever. And so thinking about this arm elevation issue, and I'll try to get us in here where we can see what's going on. Right up in here, there is a pin connected to a spring, and of course there's like a little carriage assembly right here, I guess you would say. And when it's in the highest position, of course that pin is resting downwards, so the arm is not being elevated. And then of course as the mechanism starts to move for the automatic functions, this bracket, or whatever you want to call this, it'll move to a lower position and force that pin up. And so I'm sitting here operating this manually, and I'm watching this operate, and it's doing exactly what it's supposed to do. I'm spinning it over by hand and watching it do it. And so I knew there wasn't anything stuck or anything bound up that was causing that not to work. I went ahead and touched it up a little bit with some lubrication just to make sure, but I knew it wasn't really the issue. So what I did discover, and we'll see if we can put this guy back down. What I did discover is that on this side, I got to looking at where that pin goes. And that pin right there, it's doing what it's supposed to do. But up under the arm, and that I don't think I'll be able to capture, but basically there's a plate up under there that is adjusted by this screw, and that plate raises up and down, allowing you to, adjust what height this arm raises to. And it was so far out of adjustment that it was only clicking the arm. It wasn't moving it. It was just barely touching that plate. And so I made some adjustments to that. It only took me a couple of tries. It was pretty easy to do. And now we have a working arm the way that it's supposed to. Beautifully. And then of course the auto return, perfect. So we have our mechanism working exactly as it's supposed to. So we're at the point now where we can go ahead, I can put the bottom back on it, and it's done. So I'm going to go ahead and get everything underneath reassembled, which basically is just a bottom plate. And then from that point, we're going to do a final play test, and we'll be done with this one. So give me a minute for that, and we'll come back. Well, all right, as we bring to a close our 1967 Masterwork Stereo, a division of Columbia Records, I can think of nothing more appropriate to play on something this old than the oldest album that I own. And this is the 1967 release by Vanilla Fudge. And of course, we're going to play their unbelievable rendition of You Keep Me Hanging On from this. And I want to thank you guys very much for checking out the video. Something a little off the beaten path. I don't normally work on anything quite this old. Prefer to keep it in the 70s, 80s, and beyond. But this was definitely an interesting old piece. And we got it all up and working. Everything is functioning exactly as it's supposed to. And we'll be shooting some pictures of this and putting it up for sale. So let's go ahead and listen to a little bit of this on the way out. And again, thank you guys very much for watching the video. And thank you for watching all of the videos. I know we've picked up some new subscribers to my channel. And whether you're just a person that kind of keeps up with what I'm doing and watching all the videos, or you're just, you know, stumbling in to check it out, see what's going on, appreciate it very much. And catch you on the next one. Let's hear a little bit of this.